Great. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that we are slowing down with everybody getting in from the waiting room. If you do not know me, I'm Jamie Pasquinelli, District Manager of ULI Pittsburgh. Thank you for spending your Friday morning with us. Hopefully the sun comes out today. I don't know, fingers crossed. As always, I want to give a big thank you to our sponsors that make our programming possible. Just a couple of things for our program today. Please make sure to have your mics muted throughout to prevent any distractions. Also, we will be engaging in a Q&A. So at any point you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat box and we will get that question answered for you. And I think that's all I have. So, the program will be recorded, so we will be sending that out to everybody that registered. Now I will hand it over to Dusty Kirk, our WLI chair, to get the program going. Dusty?
Thank you, Jamie. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you all on a Friday morning. And I also want to thank our generous sponsors. We have two really interesting women today for our Wake Up with WLI. And we have our own Brandy Welsh, who is going to lead the introduction and questions with Lydia Morin. And we're glad to have Lydia here as well. So Brandy is a vice president at First Commonwealth Bank, and she's been there since 2019. And prior to that, she was at HFF, which is a national real estate market company advising investors, real estate capital markets company. And Brandy works with real estate investments all across Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Prior to all her outstanding career accomplishments, she was at, I guess, what you call the U. Is that right, Brandy?
Thank you. Yes.
The University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida, and has a degree in urbanism and in real estate development. So she is a great person to be on our steering committee. We're glad to have her, and I'll turn it over to her now.
Thank you, Dusty, for the introduction. And yeah, I'm really wishing I was at the U on a day like today when the temperatures have suddenly dropped. But once COVID clears, I am looking forward to getting back there. But good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Dusty said, I'm thrilled that Lydia's joined us today for another edition of Wake Up with ULI. Hopefully everyone has their coffee. Hopefully it's warm this morning. And I'm so excited to continue to get to know Lydia alongside you all this morning. I've gotten to know her recently. Lydia is a passionate supporter and promoter of Urban Plan, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I'm excited today to find out more about her important work really in the public realm in our region. So let me first just introduce Lydia. She's young, energetic, and completely connected, and the pun is intended there. So I'll read Lydia's bio and then we'll hear more from her. Lydia Morin brings over a decade of community building experience to her role. Right now, she currently serves as the executive director of the Congress of Neighboring Communities, which is abbreviated as CONNECT. Before CONNECT, Lydia spent 3 years leading community engagement and development in the Stowe Rocks area, where part of her mission was shifting neighborhood partners from a competitive market or a competitive mindset to a more collaborative one. Morin is a founding board member of the Aetna Community Organization, helping Aetna gain national recognition as the world's first eco district and a contributor to the work of the Triborough Eco District. Lydia spent her first year, so that was 2019, I think, right, Lydia, at Connect, in over 600 meetings with leaders in the region, listening to their challenges and encouraging collaboration. I mean, I don't know how pre-Zoom you sat in 600 meetings in a year. We can get into more of that later, but so her meetings evolved into 3 cross-boundary and cross-sector working groups that she is currently leading these funded projects at Connect. And again, we'll get into those projects and policies in a few minutes. So as Jamie mentioned, I did want to remind everybody, I have a list of questions, but please feel free as we're chatting today to chat in your questions in the chat function in Zoom, and Jamie will call them out. We'll make sure that we address as many of those questions this morning as possible. So Lydia, I read your bio, but I'd love to have you give us more history on yourself. Are you a Pittsburgh native, or how long have you lived here? Some of your educational background, and how did you get started after or post-education in public government and community affairs?
Wow, you're gonna have me talk for a long time.
A big question. Let's start big.
Well, good morning. Good thing I've got my Connect mug, which if any of you want to attend our next legislative session, we give awesome hydro glass swag. So I got my coffee, and I'm looking forward to chatting with everybody. Just saw that Kara got on, so I know she's got one of these. Penny, I know you do too, Kirsten. Yeah, so I'm glad to be here. I've been loving being a member of the ULI. This was my first year as a member, and the reason I became a member was because of Urban Plan. And I guess I can kind of circle back to answering that question, Brandy. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and okay. I went to Pittsburgh Public Schools. I went to East Hills, and then Frick, and then Alderdice, and it was a little bit, I don't know a lot about the public schools now or what's going on in Pittsburgh, but when I was there was this amazing, just community engaged learning happening. We had people coming in teaching us conflict resolution and, how to make a nature trail in the back of some projects that were abutted to East Hills. And I just loved these projects as a kid. And so I think it actually really influenced me forever. We had a school bus that was painted with murals all on the inside, and we'd have storytellers coming in once a week to every school bus telling us about morality and ethics and community and why it matters to be involved and why you should care about people who have different lives than you did. And being at East Hills, I saw a lot of people with different lives than I had, and got to make lifelong friends who I now see. Like, I just think what Pittsburgh Public Schools was doing in the 90s and late 80s was really good, because we've got a lot of alumni who are now just so community engaged and so important to our new scene of Pittsburgh. I think that investment was huge. So not to get on a soapbox, but I always think it's kind of funny when banks are like, where's the pipeline? And I'm like, how about public education? Anyway, that's a little bit of a thing. I had to soapbox hard for Pittsburgh Public Schools in the 90s. We got a lot of really good people out of that. And then I went to the University of Vermont, which was very similar. I thought I would go to the Peace Corps after going to the University of Vermont. That was kind of the plan for a while. I was really involved in the student government. I helped one of the coolest projects. I had 2 really neat projects that shaped a lot of what I wanted to do in college. One was work with the United Nations and St. Lucia for a year-long intensive in community and economic development, where we worked to make constructed wetlands in St. Lucia at the bottom of a lot of pig farms, and that were killing coral reefs with runoff. And that was a really important thing to me. And then my senior year, they were building a brand new building, and it was going to be LEED Platinum. And I was like, what is LEED? And I ended up taking a class that was all about, this class is going to be the people that help evaluate LEED on the student side of things and help make sure this building has everything that we need. And that was a really eye-opening experience for me. But then I graduated in 2008. I don't know if anyone else graduated in college that year, but that was a tough time to get a job in any field. I probably should have done what a lot of my peers did and went to grad school, but instead I moved to Los Angeles and got involved in film production. And it was a sort of there's an other side of me that's completely a fantasy executive producer of movies and comedy. It's just a whole other side of me. sometimes I think about my job as from the executive producer standpoint, and I think of myself at Connect trying to produce a bunch of policy stars. But so yeah, I was in LA doing film production. That's what brought me back to Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh invested in film production and I always wanted to come back. And I started working at Island Studios. I don't know if anyone remembers this big investment they tried to make in McKees Rocks, and shot a bunch of different movies there that were varying degrees of success. Some of them are really big. You've probably seen like She's Out of My League and other movies that were really bizarre. So I'll just leave it there. But while I was in the Keys Rocks, all of my community development kind of stuff from before I went on that tangent to film production came back. When we were going door to door for locations or looking for extras in the neighborhood, it was kind of amazing. We needed 1970s sets, and we could find them by knocking on any door in McKees Rocks. The homes were like perfectly preserved of 1970s living rooms and things like that. It was kind of amazing. But I also noticed there was just great inequity in the film industry. It does produce a lot of waste. It just felt like there was a lot of money that we're leaving on the table with community. And I wanted to find a way to get back to that. How do we give back? How do we make this better? How do we plan better? How do we get more people involved? And that's what took me to grad school at Hines College. And a few other things. That was a good answer, right? A lot of, I hit all your questions in that one.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say, I think comedy is a great way to wake up. So feel free to interject some of those skills throughout our interview today.
We'll try. It's early.
So let's fast forward to you joined Connect in 2019, correct?
Yes, January.
Okay. And as executive director, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody on this call to know that Southwestern Pennsylvania is completely fragmented in terms of just the number of governments that we have in, the somewhat dense area in which all of those governments serve. And so how challenging that must be for sharing information, making policies, and partnering. So tell us about your role. Tell us about Connect and your role as executive director there, and kind of what you do, what the mission is, what you do day to day.
Sure. So just curious if folks want to raise their hand. I'm just wondering how many people have heard of Connect or worked with Connect in some way in the last 10 years? Got a couple. Yeah, great. So some of this might be a little bit of a review for like the 7 of you that raised your hands, but we're working on that. Now 100% of this room has heard of Connect and met with us. So here we go. So Connect was founded because of exactly the problem that Brandy just said. And it's really unique that we have so many municipalities. There are a couple other places around the country that have a major metropolitan city that share borders with lots of municipalities. And then to be completely fair, one of my mentor, Dave Miller, who passed in November, would always say, I'd go to places and say, sharing any number of borders was hard. Someone would say, oh yeah, it's so hard to work with our neighbors. And he'd be like, how many do you have? And they'd say 6 or 4. And he'd be like, oh, that's funny. Pittsburgh has 30. But it's always hard to work with your neighbors. And if you don't know them, if you don't have a relationship, if you don't have good opportunities to have positive interactions with them frequently and consistently, it's really important to have that. And it's hard when you're scattered across an entire county with rivers and bridges, and also completely inundated in sort of, economic decline and like disinvestment over 20, 30 years. And so what Dave saw was, okay, there's a lot of buzz around, maybe some of you shouldn't exist. And that was really not making the municipalities very happy. You should never tell anyone they shouldn't exist is a fun life lesson that I got to learn right off of that. That I didn't have to learn, they learned it for me 20 years ago. But you don't want to tell people they don't want to exist, but you can help them figure out what services they might need to offer or who they can work with. And maybe they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And maybe we could have sort of this uniform feeling of an identity. And so no one really thought it could happen, that they could get a table together with all the governments and that they might have anything in common. They all felt so different from each other. And Jenny Easton, who's on the call today, was actually Dave Miller's intern at that time, going to grad school at Gispia, and she convened the very first legislative session of Connect, which was, I think, 2008 or 2009. And what was great about that was that the city didn't think any of the other governments were going to show up. All of the other governments were feeling kind of angry towards the city, and they didn't think the city would show up. And the foundations thought this would never work, but if it does, we'll pay for it. And it worked. And so what happened was they all came together for the first time. It wasn't a conversation about who should be in charge, where the power should be, or, you know, who's lacking what, because everybody was lacking something, and probably we all still are, in one way or another. But it was about, what do we have in common? What could we do together? And that has always been our theme. And since then, it's just evolved to being this network of not only our governments, but a lot of really interesting corporate and state level and nonprofit partners who are focused on the same challenges that our member governments are at any given time. So yeah, our mission is just to advance the quality of life across for all residents in all of our municipalities, and help our municipalities be able to, you know, deliver that.
Great,
So
thank you. So what are some of those top policy areas that you guys have identified kind of over the life of Connect, you know, maybe at its inception and then to today, and maybe even breaking it down pre and, you know, then during COVID and kind of post COVID? What are the top policy areas that your communities are focused on?
Yeah. So I think from the beginning, there's been these sort of overarching umbrellas of economic development and equity. And since then, there's a lot of different ways to approach that. And it sort of depends, you know, where the opportunity could be at a time, and also what is the thing the residents are being the loudest about. Like, what can they not get through a council meeting without hearing something about? In the early 2000s, one of the first big wins was solar was coming to the region, and zoning for solar was really tricky. There really wasn't anything written for any municipalities. And so Connect got a huge grant from the federal government to help almost all of our municipalities develop something, who wanted to develop something around being able to incentivize solar panels in their region, in their neighborhoods, on commercial and residential buildings. And that was a huge win, because it was the first time that we realized, oh, actually, this would be good for everybody. Let's all try. And that was a big push. Another big, so things around energy and utilities coordination have sort of been legacy issues. And then when we started getting the utilities together and talk about these things, we realized, wow, there's a lot of other stuff that municipalities and utilities don't often have a chance to talk about, and don't always have the most collaborative relationship. It's often very contentious, because you call, why haven't you restored power? Or why are there so many power lines on this? You know, it ends up being a little bit, or why are you digging up my road again? We literally just paved it. You didn't talk to us. There's no rule that says you have to talk to us. And so what Connect sort of said was, there's no rule, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't. Maybe we could plan together a little more. And so Connect started having these utility summits, and out of those came, is anyone here familiar with Coordinate PA? I don't know if there's a lot of utilities or infrastructure folks on the call, but Coordinate PA was a really big effort for the last 5 years. It sort of got launched in 2020 or 2019 and really took off in 2020. And the idea is that with any major project, you only have to call 3 days in advance to say you're going to do it to some central place, and that's PA one call. And so they started coming to our meetings, and our municipality said, all right, well, why don't we, if they're not going to have a way to do this, why don't we develop a software that we could start entering our projects? And if we know that this road needs maintenance, but People's Gas also knows they're going to do maintenance on it a year or 2 years from now, because that's when they schedule it, shouldn't we split the cost of paving? And they started, couldn't there be a way to do this? And so that's what started to happen with Coordinate PA. Utilities and municipalities are able to enter projects onto this database And this came out of a lot of beta tests, a lot of creativity and ideation out of Connect and PA1 call. And oh, I feel bad, I'm not remembering the software team, but there was folks out of CMU and Create, and I think some corporate partners. And so PA1 call formed Coordinate PA. Now they've launched it across the state. And it's like a very big step towards collaborative planning and spending infrastructure dollars more effectively, right? Because you pay for that road every time, either as a ratepayer or a taxpayer, and you're also held up by it when it's closed again, which is the thing that people are usually the most angry about. So that was a really big thing. And then at the same time, we're also spending time in public safety, health, and human resources. We work there in 2011 was sort of the beginning of this. We did a critical needs report around all of these sort of police, fire, and EMS services. The budgets were bad, the services were unequal. And I don't know if you know this, but every municipality used to have its own station wagon that was its own ambulance company. So not so long ago, we had 130 different ambulance companies that were barely staying afloat. They've consolidated over time. I think we have about 40 now. But what this critical conditions report helped do was help consolidate a lot of those EMS. And at the same time, the county and a lot of municipalities are saying, why do we all have our own 911? We should probably not all have our own 911. This is expensive. And so they started to figure out how to make a more effective 911 dispatch. I don't know that everything is solved. Almost nothing is 10 years later. It's a constant job creation, I guess, but those were big deals. And then that led us to being really well poised for the opioids crisis to play a big role in harm reduction there with policy around Narcan. I don't know if folks know what Narcan is, but it is, I think Suboxone is the generic term. And what it does is it revives people after an overdose death, an accidental death. And we were having so many accidental deaths because opioids had become so much more, I mean, they were already uncontrolled, but people had addicted. A lot of people had developed addiction and then started buying street drugs. They didn't know what was in it and overdosing and dying. And it was just really tragic. We were seeing really high levels of death in our communities that could have been prevented if police, EMS, or neighborhood organizations had Narcan. So we did a huge push on getting policy around carrying Narcan. And actually the biggest part of that was a culture change around the stigma. And, why would we want to save the life of somebody who's struggling was a hard thing for some people to understand, but now it's completely a given. Of course, we want to save lives. And so the policy now reflects that. Those are some things. I feel like I talked for a while now, though.
No, that's imperative really in our community. So many of those issues, obviously. And I think, as you mentioned, the job is not yet done. It just changes, with each through the pandemic or through each next new challenge. You're still working on those initiatives and perhaps new ones spurring from those. So thank you for sharing that. I did want to specifically call out another product of Connect that you're working on, and because it's so important also to the ULI mission, and we understand that real estate and the built environment, the impact that they have on climate change, it's a consistent concern. And so I know with your work at Connect, you've established and started to implement a regional climate action plan. So if you want to kind of elaborate the communities that are involved in that right now and where you see this going, its objectives and measures.
Absolutely. This is my favorite thing right now. I mean, you're not supposed to say that, right? All your kids are your favorite, but that's how we talk about projects. But this is a really exciting thing. And it also helped me develop the model kind of how I'm leading Connect and what works is because we're based out of the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, GISPIA. I bet we have some alum on the call. Anyone want to identify themselves as a GISPIA alum? We almost always do. All right, we got one. And so GISPIA is just a great pipeline of talent to our region. And it has had a much larger focus of recent years on international relations. They're getting all kinds of awards for, international things. But besides Connect, we had sort of and the Johnson Institute's nonprofit management clinic, we had sort of gotten away from being this really exciting place to keep people in Pittsburgh after they come here for this premier graduate school. And my new thought was, this is how the lead work started. And I'll just do one story around the public safety to sort of set the tone for this model. But we had a student in 2017 that said, our policy around, this is the same time that we're doing Narcan and changing those policies and getting Narcan and actually distributing Narcan, getting it into the hands, working with the health department, the county health department, to get this huge windfall of Narcan they had out into the communities. They were having such trouble with the community engagement side, but Connect was able to come in and say, we're actually connected to everybody and we know everyone who wants Narcan. Give it to us, we'll get it out. And that worked. And that began a really powerful partnership with the health department. And at the same time, we had a student intern, Joellen Marsh, who was doing her capstone on pre-arrest diversion policy and how it has a much greater effect on issues around racial injustice in the jails and around harm, like reducing harm in the communities that are suffering the most from opioids use. And so this model of having a capstone out of Gispia, dig deep, build relationships with the communities throughout this work, throughout their time as a student over the 2 years, and then be able to say, wow, we've invested a lot in this human. We better not lose them. We got to keep them involved in this work. We fundraised with the health department to have them be the Connect liaison to for the health department, so they could really get out of the community. Because at the same time, the health department was having a little bit of a city-centric perception issue, that they were only really working in the city, and a lot of the municipalities that were suffering weren't getting what they needed. And at the same time, we started hearing a lot of the issues around the jail, and the jail being overpopulated and having like 80% of the people in the jail that don't even have charges brought against them. And a huge percentage of the people who were there were just there because of drug and alcohol use, and they weren't getting the help they needed to not keep coming back there. And we were spending so much money on not helping these people over and over again. And so the capstone really looked into all these economic sides of diversion. And that was a big help in starting to get folks to see it a little bit differently. Not in addition to like, let's not let people die anymore. It was also a very good business decision. Generally not letting people die is a good business decision, I guess. But and so that was a great model. And so in this fall of 2020, in the fall of 2019, a student came in who had already been sort of recruited by the DEP to help one municipality do a climate action plan. The DEP is doing this project that actually, if you know anyone that you're working with in any community across Pennsylvania that wants to do a climate action plan, the DEP has a great program right now that pairs you with an intern to do a lot of the legwork. And so when Eric came in, and so we had advertised this to our municipalities, we weren't sure. We never know which way they're going to go with new ideas. Usually it's better if one of them brings it up. And Millvale and West Homestead had said, yeah, we're probably going to do this. Someone else should do it too. And so we ended up having 6 municipalities participate in this DEP program, and Eric come in as a student intern almost 2 years ago now and say, this is my passion. I want to build a greenhouse gas inventory for this community. And then I just want to do something with energy and communities and government. And I was like, okay, we're going to keep you in Connect. You can't go anywhere. And over the year, it was going really well. And then, as you know, COVID hit, and a ton of these interns did drop out because it was just so confusing how to do this job remotely. And I don't know, it's kind of, this is all secondhand now that we're on Zoom, just having this conversation. But if you remember this time last year, especially in higher ed, people were just like, I don't know, what are we going to do? I think every industry experienced that. And Eric stepped up and helped every one of the Connect municipalities finish their data inventories and their community engagement plans, so that we would have 6 municipalities. I mean, I helped him too, but honestly, I got to give him all the credit. He did not shy away from this huge challenge. And so then I was starting to think, it does not make sense with climate action. It makes no sense for a 1 square mile town to try so hard to reduce energy, reduce air quality things. It's not going to do it. Climate action has to be regional, right? And so we need to get at least all of Connect on board. It'd be great if we could get the county on board. And we need to have a mechanism to do this greenhouse gas inventory that is not so laborious, because to do a greenhouse gas inventory, you have to talk to every single vendor from gas, waste management, water. You have to get information from the SPC, who has been a great partner in this. And it takes a long time to do that for 40 governments. But we're going to work on that, because we did it once before where we started streamlining data using technology, and we're going to try to create a greenhouse gas inventory for the entire region that we work with the utilities rather than right to knowing them, and they can just give us the data that they already have, that they can easily give without having these middlemen. And so we thought, okay, this shouldn't actually be that hard. It is, but we thought maybe it wouldn't be, to get them to do a regional plan. But it wasn't hard to get the buy-in. What's a really cool thing about Connect is that once a couple communities start getting positive press or new funding or some kind of investment because of work they've done, kind of like the Triborough Eco District in Etna, we're seeing a lot more investment after doing all that work. The rest of the communities are kind of like, I want that shiny thing too. And so with the climate action plan, we worked with the DEP to say, okay, we want to do it regional. We want to make sure that, and the reason that you do a project with the DEP, of course, is that there's usually a funding thing that is unlocked after you've done it. So there will be funding unlocked for a lot of cool projects if our region has this climate action plan, and they can decide, we don't need to have this thing in our community, but it'll be a good idea if it exists in our region. Start less of that economic investment competition where it's like, no, our municipality needs that tax base. We're not going to help that municipality. The climate action plan is, we're all working for the water and air quality and the quality of life, the health for all of our residents. And it matters what the next door person is doing. And so it was not so hard for Connect to buy in, but we are realizing that we're going to need to build this infrastructure of getting the data into the greenhouse gas inventory so that we can measure our progress. And at the same time, sustainability in Western Pennsylvania almost feels like the Wild West right now, because there are so many people focusing on it and running workshops and putting out reports with various indicators to measure progress. In fact, I've been working with Sustainable Pittsburgh for a while, and folks with the P4 to note that there are over 1,000 different key indicators identified in hundreds of reports on sustainability for our region. And we have not moved in the same direction at the same time quite yet. And so what we're hoping to do with a climate action plan is, just keep engaging all those leaders that we talk to so that we can start agreeing to what are some good ideas to have in it and to move in the same direction at the same time while doing the things that we're all best at. And so it's just beginning. We just got news from Hines that I'm going to be able to hire Eric as the project manager for this now. And we're going to work with the Western Pennsylvania Regional Data Center and our partners across utilities and sort of sustainability bending NGOs to make this happen. And another very cool thing is that we've now engaged the county council, who just passed unanimously the formation of a sustainability committee with the goal of a regional climate action plan. Like, their job is to help shepherd this regional climate action plan. And so the next steps are really talking a little bit more with the SPC, because honestly, I mean, I haven't said this out loud to a lot of people, so you're all hearing it first. It would be awesome if they kind of owned it. Because another thing that Connect does is build it up, prove that it needs to exist, prove that it can be sustainable, and then spin it out. So we did that with the community paramedic program. We did that with Coordinate PA, and we're hoping to do that with the regional climate action plan now.
That's awesome, Lydia. And I saw a lot of heads nodding on this call. I think we feel your pain in terms of sustainability being the wild, wild west. So if anyone, that may be something to bring up in the chat later, connections that ULI and those of us here this morning with WLI can help be an advocate for and can continue to connect you with important people and groups working on sustainability as well here in the region, because we got to drill down those metrics. I
that would be amazing.
Way too many. So you hit on, in answering that question, you hit on an interesting concept that I wanted to highlight and ask. With the pandemic and having so many municipalities, how would you say these communities were affected in their communication and collaboration in, were we able to get on Zoom? How did meetings happen? Were they halted, or did it just kind of seamlessly transfer? And was there more collaboration as a result of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know a little bit of this because I've been sort of shocked by it all year. One of the things I'm most proud of that Connect did was immediately understand that we needed to be on camera and face to face to do the work we did, and that we were certainly not going to bring people into any kind of room. And so we had a big meeting March 26th. It was to pass new bylaws. It was to set the slate for maybe start talking about what the resolutions were supposed to be for April. Every year we have a legislative session. Sort of our strategic planning. We say, these are the things that we are all going to like sign a document, vote on to say that we're going to participate in together. And I was just beside myself on March 5th, like the day, I think it was like March 17th or something, or somewhere that was only like a week and a half away from that meeting. And I didn't want to move it, didn't want to do it as a call. I was almost like, should I just cancel it? Are we just going to live in this abyss? I don't know. You guys remember, that was just a weird, scary time. Also, am I going to die from my grocery delivery? It was just stress. And I have to give so much credit to our founding advisor, Dave Miller, who said, you got to be on camera and you can do it. Every single one of them can. They all have laptops, they all have cell phones, and they're going to do it. They're just going to do it. He just believed that they would do it, which helped me and my staff onboard everybody on the executive committee to Zoom. We created Zoom training materials. I think our Connect Zoom training materials made it through all of our working groups. I had people emailing it to me all around April and May. It was still making the circuit. And then we got everybody comfortable, and they're like, well, you know what? I don't think our council's going to meet. I can't get my council on Zoom. We don't have Zoom. What even is Zoom? I'm like, you have it now because you're on it talking to me. You're good. But it was scary. That kind of change, that kind of rapid systems change was sort of a lot. And it took a new kind of bravery to be on camera. I think a lot of us still have it. I mean, to be fair, now it's more of like, I just don't have to get dressed today, so I'm not. But and no shade at anybody who's off camera right now, though I would love to see your faces. But with Connect, we say, if you're at the meeting, you need to be on camera because we're in person. Yeah, no pressure, Jenny. But it was a big important thing because when you're talking about policy, when you're talking about changes and scary things, it is much better to be looking at somebody in the face. And that was what Dave emphasized. And to be honest, he had been pushing for Skype meetings for like the last decade, but the technology hadn't been adapted, because for a regional collaboration, when you have very busy executive leaders from a bunch of governments who also have day jobs, to come to meetings to collaborate, a 1 hour meeting is usually like a 3 hour time commitment, right? You got to park, you got to drive there, you got to leave time for missing your exit in Pittsburgh, because if you miss a bridge, you got a half-hour problem on your hands. And so we have found that since that March meeting, which ended up being this rally together, this first time ever, the municipality said, ooh, what is going to happen to our tax revenue? We've already been suffering for the last 30 years. Maybe we should talk about consolidation. And that was this, and mergers and working. It was a seismic shift in the disincorporation conversation, because the municipalities themselves had never brokered that thought. It had always been folks like the Institute of Politics or the state coming at them saying, there's too many of you, you're all bad at your jobs, you don't need to exist. And so this was them saying, we've proven ourselves as good, we've built up our self-esteem through Connect and through other projects going well. Maybe we're ready to talk about this, because maybe we should share things. Maybe there's good outcomes that can come of this. And so that was just a breakthrough in all of these other topic areas that we work in. Because if it's moving towards, oh, but like for LEAD, for the law enforcement assisted diversion program, it's a bunch of police departments that have to work together to be able to do this, to share a service of case management. And so when we start talking about good relationships around shared services, we start thinking about some big changes in how people's quality of life are. Because if you think about it, a municipality exists to deliver services. And if you can't do that, that's not a great argument for existing, but we don't want to say that. And so it's sort of became this really important thing on this Zoom meeting of everybody looking at each other and saying, we're going to get through this. We're going to have to work together a lot harder than we ever have before. And we're going to have to keep showing up on Zoom, on camera. And then we had the busiest summer of my life. I thought 600 meetings driving around town for 1 year was a lot. I think we probably did like 600 that summer because we had municipal tax revenue crisis. We had PPE conversations. I mean, it all feels so long ago now, but it was just, we were the switchboard for a lot of folks because there has been such disinvestment in intergovernmental relations and not enough forward-thinking investment in technology and communications with government. And so out of that has spun a new working group, Communications and Technology, where we're looking at the digitization of government so that there's equitable and accessible government services available online. And yeah, so that's exciting. A lot of we've had intense engagement. We had multiple people who wanted to be officers this year, which I think is a really important sign of engagement when folks are like, I want to be chair. No, I want to be chair. It's like that has never happened for Connect. And so then we have co-chairs of all the working groups and getting little projects funded throughout the way because we've been so engaged and helping our partners get engaged has helped people get, these little wins along the way have really helped the momentum. One of those was taking urban plan to digital. I thought that was huge. We had our lightning round. We had I think we had 10 different Connect communities come and do urban plan on the lightning round, and they loved it. So I don't know. To answer your question, Zoom has changed a lot. We learned a lot through it. I'm taking a 2-week-long vacation this summer and not doing what I did last year. And yeah, it's good stuff though.
Now you answered one of my upcoming questions was, then how many meetings did you have last year?
I'm not actually, I didn't count.
At least double, because you did 600 just in a summer on Zoom. That is insane Zoom fatigue. And I see Kirsten asked a question that's a little related. She says, Lydia, what kind of coffee do you drink? Because it's amazing how much energy you have and how much you manage. So please tell us your secret.
You're gonna laugh. I drink decaf because I have so much anxiety.
That's not fair.
No, it is. You would not like me on caffeine.
All right, Kirsten, I don't know if that deflated you. So kind of on the same note, just one last question, and then we can kind of get more into urban plan. And I see some other questions coming in. So we hit on technology and your heroic really effort into getting these municipalities transferred to Zoom, and I guess 10 to 14 days in March last year.
Well, not all the municipalities, at least one person that was part of Connect. And then we actually hosted council meetings on Zoom for a lot of our municipalities over April and May. And I think we sort of were like, okay, we got to stop doing this. You can do this now in June.
They had a 3-month onboarding.
Yeah.
How also, I mean, and you mentioned more individuals coming to want to participate, to elevate their participation through the board or other sort of positions. So, WLI is a women's leadership initiative and a women's organization. I'd love to get your opinion and your thoughts, what you're seeing in women in government and how that accelerated in our region, or what challenges have there been, and just your thoughts on what you've seen over the past, let's call it 14 months, and where it's going, women in government.
Oh yeah. So I know there's been a lot of stuff where women are having a hard time in leaving the workforce at alarming rates. And that is not something that we should take our focus off of. And so what I'm saying does not take away focus from that issue, because it is real. But for government, because government is kind of this a lot of the municipalities, it's more of a volunteer job, but it is something that you have to have time to go to. What's been really neat is how many young mothers have gotten involved in their local governments because they can now, because they can go to meetings on Zoom. We have 2 new members that got appointed through various channels over the pandemic that are showing up to everything because they can now, and they can have their kid next to them. And I don't know about you, but I think my mom makes the best choices. So I want more moms in local government for sure. And what is very cool about it is they are active and they are focusing on collaboration in a way that I think was a much harder lift for Dave and kind of the old boys club that, you know, would golf together, compete with each other, and kind of make it more of a competitive thing, even if it was a friendly competition about municipal management. And it still is very male dominated in a lot of spaces. But it is exciting to see that connect all the people who want to do a little bit extra, who really care, who really see that the problems in most municipalities won't be solved by most municipalities alone. It's a lot of women, and it's been really great. Our officers, you know, our co-chairs are very balanced, but I think the cool thing is seeing a lot of the people who I know would have been kind of forced out of the conversations because they couldn't get a babysitter, or they couldn't get away from whatever they were doing, are doing it now, and that does help a lot. So I'm bolstered by it. I think the more women in government, the better. I think everyone in this room can probably agree. At least a balanced representation will be very good.
Absolutely. And that is, thank you for highlighting that, because we, not so recently, we had a session with WLI on this sheet. We're calling it the she session, and I can't even say that 5 times fast.
Yeah.
With the pandemic, and focusing on a McKinsey report and kind of the effect in the corporate world, as you mentioned, and just trying to understand that and watch that and track that as COVID comes to an end, hopefully here. But that is a shining light, and I am so pleased to hear that, because I agree that we are more collaborative as women, and maybe it's just more empathetic or better listeners sometimes, but that's great to hear, and thank you for sharing that.
Can I put a little dimmer on it though?
Yeah,
just because I gotta be real. These are unpaid positions, right? So it is still very much a she session. They have time to now volunteer because they're not working, right? They're volunteering for their local government. And so the sustainability of quality leadership at the local government level is very tricky, because you do need to pay people, but those jobs are volunteer jobs. So there's a certain amount of sort of privilege to be able to do it, and also a sort of amount of saying, well, now I'm not making 100,000 at my old job, I guess I'm going to go help my government for free. But that's a huge economic problem in my mind. And so when we talk about there being too many municipalities, we also have to talk about the fact that we have the lowest pay scale for municipal management in the entire country, because we have so many municipalities that need management. And so we pay less than anywhere else, which is probably part of a reason that we don't always have the best. We have a lot of the best people. I'm not saying we don't, but we can't always keep them. And a lot of this development and management work takes a long time of making relationships and understanding a community, and then meeting developers and like brokering conversations that are just like, what can we do together over time, rather than I have money that I'm putting in your community right now. If you don't change your zoning, say goodbye, I'll go next door, And so I do think there's a large conversation to have around like valuing government leadership and paying for it. and we should have women in those positions.
Absolutely. No, we hear that. So I did want to, there's some questions coming in So first, before we get to those questions, I did just want to mention, Jamie put in the chat box a link to Urban Plan Lightning Round, which is next Wednesday afternoon. So if you have not experienced Urban Plan and you want to, in a lightning round, understand what it is and learn from the process, please join us next Wednesday. Sign up for that. It's in the afternoon. It's, I think, 2 to 3 hours. So it's a fast paced urban planning exercise responding to a request for proposal. So
And it's friendly competition.
yeah, it's fun. And you can bring a
if you're working with any communities right now that are having any kind of conversations about development, this is a great thing to send them to. I watched someone that I worked with in McKees Rocks at one of the sessions that we did. I don't remember which one it was. I guess it was the first one. It was sort of that pilot one that we did before everything got crazy. And I watched her think, oh boy, I have been thinking about this all from one perspective. I did not think about it from any other perspectives. And we could, if I had, and we all know with negotiation, if you don't think about what the other side wants, you're never going to get a win-win. And I think that's what the urban plan thing does, is it helps folks that are really dug in to their side of planning and really listening to maybe one side of like a community group or the government or a bank to look and consider and actually experience what it is to have that other experience. It's about empathy, honestly. And so if you're working with anybody and you haven't had a lot of success in getting a whole mindset shift, I would really recommend it. It's gonna be fun. And it's supposed to rain next Wednesday, so come do it with us.
Perfect. Hey, Lynn, you have a really great question. I wanted to know if you wanted to turn your microphone off and ask Lydia your question.
I'm just going to go back to it, so I phrase it. I try to keep it as simple as possible, but many communities, have a negative approach to any development today. And I think obviously much of that is based on past experiences. So how do we better educate communities on the positive aspects, the economic development, the taxes? I mean, there are some projects that I agree should not be built and don't go in certain areas, but there's nowhere for them to really go to a community to say what is really right or wrong, and because they immediately distrust everything. So how do we begin to change that? And obviously urban plan to me is phenomenal, but I wondered if you experienced this and what thoughts you might have about it.
Absolutely. It'll give me an opportunity to talk about another really big kind of culture shifting project that we did with Connect around transit oriented development. I think some of you on this call were actually really involved with that. Kirsten, Jenny, I don't know if others, but the idea was the Port Authority had, I'm just giving you kind of a case study as an example of one way that we've done it, and others. I mean, with the solar, it is about the trust and relationships first and getting people to say what they want and then saying, oh, well, here's actually how you can get what you want, is kind of what I think the Connect has proven. And if you can go at it from that angle, it is a really big changer. Like, what do you want? I mean, any negotiation, right? Like, what do you want? What is your win, so that I can know what and know what you have to offer. What are you really offering them? Are you offering them something really good, or are you offering them potentially like a wastewater center in their parking lot? I don't know. So it's sort of, there's jobs there, but so anyway, the transit oriented development is you'll know what it is. I don't have to explain that. You're all urban land folks, but the idea is around creating communities that can be very inclusive, because you can get to them on public transit, you can walk, there's density, there's urban life happening. And we've got a lot of really well set up communities, especially within Connect, for there to be much more connection. In fact, there used to be, almost all the communities used to have those streetcars and little stations, and
Sure.
Not everybody had cars. Our communities weren't designed for this many cars. And so but over time, cars took over. We love our cars. I've got 2. It's ridiculous, but we got to get better. Climate action plan, all that. But a good side angle of that was this transit oriented development project, where the Port Authority said, okay, we have all these station areas that we cannot develop that could be awesome economic drivers for municipalities, but your zoning is absurd and we can't build. And that was a conversation that sort of started lightly when someone's like, well, why can't we develop an apartment here? Or I don't know, has anyone ever been involved with Castle Shannon and Transit Village?
Familiar, very familiar with it. Mhm.
Yeah. So that was sort of the conversation of why can't this happen? What is going on? And why can't the Port Authority work on these projects? And so what we did, Lynn, was it was a cohort of intense education and data collection with nationally kind of celebrated consultants, Dover Cole, who you probably know Victor as the guy who's all about the new urbanism. This is probably the crowd that knows who this is. I don't have to talk too much about that, but it was a big deal for Connect to bring in folks that had gone into communities that didn't have transit and helped change the zoning and then showed beautiful examples. We also worked with UA and GAI. They came in and gave lots of intense education and also planning sessions of like fantasy with these port authorities of like, this is the area you have. Port Authority could have this money. You could develop a commercial district around your main street if you change this zoning. Bethel Park was trying really hard. Jetty was there doing a major culture shift around their station. South Hills Village, Swissville, Wilkinsburg, I'm missing some, Mount Lebanon, Dormont. And I guess I should highlight Dormont because out of all of them, they took that and said, we're going to do a comprehensive plan, change our zoning, recognize that some of our zoning was actually super racist. We were literally trying to keep Black people out of our community by some of the stuff that we wrote into our code. And they had this huge community group meeting about it. And everyone was like, oh, we would like to have transit. We'd like to have more shops to work with. We love Potomac Avenue. We want more. And so once these 10 communities, and Wilkinsburg has a great transit study happening. There's all kinds of things that are happening because of this work of them saying, oh, we want this. This is the shiny thing our neighbors have. So it's really about creating less of a, we want to come in here and do this with you, more of a, hey, nice to meet you. What are you interested in? Like, what are your community goals? And so that's what Connect is also helping do, is like do a lot of community engagement with our councils to say, what kind of development do you want to attract? What are your assets and what don't you like, or you would like, or what space do you have to offer that you'd like to see transformed? And that's been a really cool thing to watch in Etna already with the eco district. Once we knew what kind of things we wanted and what kind of projects we're having a hard time finishing and what buildings definitely needed to go and get investment, it's all like happening 3 years later. It's kind of remarkable. We're getting a beer garden, Riverfront Park, and that was because the municipality, the manager, Mary Ellen Ravitch, super recognized that there was a lot of opportunity that they didn't have, but didn't know how to quite get it all the time. And then the municipality, and then a lot of the residents were saying, why don't we have this? Your government we're mad at you, government. And then developers were saying, we never thought to develop there. You didn't invite us. And it's been kind of, and we included all of those folks in the conversation of creating like the kind of fantasy high level goals. And then when developers started saying, hey, we want to do this, it's very easy to say, good, we've got the zoning ready and it's on the list of the kind of projects we'd really like to have. Please come. So I think that model, the more we can do that, the more we'll see it.
Yeah, that's a great case study. Thank you. Kara, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Lydia.
Hey, friend.
So this has been something that's been on my mind a lot lately. I know, obviously, with COVID, there's a lot of financial impact to communities, but throughout the last year and a half, there's been a lot of highlight on social injustices. And I know from working with communities, they're also taking this really unique approach to planning for the future and seeing kind of how their residents' needs and wants and interests have changed because of COVID with work from home and things like that. I apologize if you hear my dog in the background, but I guess I'm kind of curious from your perspective, like what are some other things that have come to light because of COVID that are, concerns or needs or just things that other municipalities are kind of highlighting on now, just I get ballparking it, I mean, it's kind of interesting seeing how all of the different changes that are going on in local government right now. But it is very hard to kind of pinpoint what each of the needs or concerns or different things that are coming up because of this crazy pandemic that we've been in.
One exciting thing that was, really noted was just how much people are craving green space that they can walk to. I think we all saw that when we were like, the only reason you're allowed to go outside is to exercise. And, some people had a great park to go do that in, and others like, we're waiting to build ours in Etna. So we didn't quite, it was, you could really, the emphasis around residents caring about having trees, having shade trees, having access to green space, having playgrounds again, where it was a really kind of interesting thing to see, because we've talked about Tree Pittsburgh and tree programs for a long time in Connect, but there's always a lot of folks that are really scared of shade trees and public space investments, because maybe we get the funding to build it now, but how will we sustain it? And I think a lot of folks are trying to find creative ways to, add that quality of life, because if folks are working from home, it's a lot nicer to be able to walk somewhere for lunch, have a nice time outside and walk back. But a lot of our communities are lacking that kind of thing. I do think we're going to end up back downtown and in Oakland again pretty soon, but it's a very good thing for communities to be able to come home and walk to a happy hour or do something. And so, or grocery store. So those kind of things became a lot more evident as people were spending more time in their own communities as residents. And then our council started hearing a little bit more about that. And then a big also thing is we've just sort of noticed the racial segregation of our communities and the representation. I get flack on my board. I have an all-white board, and we try to work with a lot of different diverse community organizations. And it's been hard for me because we have diverse representation with experience and age and gender, and each of those white people are very representative of their like 90% white municipality that then decided to do more work, but it is hard to get representation. And so our municipalities and we have started this journey of what does anti-racism in policy look like and zoning, and what does welcoming and inviting community look like? How do we do what Atlanta's been doing? We have to literally work to invite folks in, incentivize. Maybe I won't get on to too political, but when we talk about reparations, maybe reparations is making more space available in communities that are lacking diversity, that would like diversity. Like in our Etna plan, we are a 95 or something % white town that's 1 square mile, but we say it is better to be in a community with a lot of people who look different and have different backgrounds than us, and we want that, and we're trying to figure out how to do that. And so we've been with a lot of our sponsors, a lot of you are on here today, so thank you for that, by the way. We took what we would have spent on the open bar for our legislative session this year, and we hired a facilitator, Lee Solomon Pugliano, to take us through this Governing for the Common Good series of just what does it mean to govern for the common good. And it's a really it's not just about race, but there's a big, heavy anti-racist bend towards every discussion. And it is not so much about maybe what we're doing. So it's about changing some of the things that are disincentivizing, like zoning, like Dormont can't add any more people. They're all built up unless they build density, but a lot of our communities could. And how could they incentivize more population to come from other parts of the country, not just pulling from our own region, to come here? Like, I don't want to say Atlanta again, but it is really impressive. When I was working in McKees Rocks, I had 3 colleagues of Black color who said, I am getting out of here. This was before that gender, they're like, I got to move to Atlanta. I'm not going to have the experiences that I want to have here. I don't like living here. I don't feel included, and I'm not going to get to lead. And so they 2 out of 3 of them moved to Atlanta for different jobs. And that was a thing that we now have numbers to, like, I think it was 7,000 to 12,000 people have just left Pittsburgh. And so I do think there is something for us to do to invite people back in, incentivize that. Because if we don't have enough people to have representation, it's only going to get worse. And that's the only solution I can think of how to have a more diverse board. If we have more, we need to have enough people to be representative of.
Yeah, Lydia, I couldn't agree more. And it's something that's always a top of mind here for us, with ULI as we put presentations together and just having a representative community, a diverse and inclusive community of thought leaders and interdisciplinary, right? And so I know that you and your colleagues at Connect are doing significant work with municipalities on that and down to the project level, right? So thank you. I do need to mention that we are out of time.
Oh, sorry.
We could go on forever. I really, truly appreciate this conversation. And I know there were some questions that we didn't get to answer. So we can, maybe follow up with you on those later. I think there were one or two. But again, thank you, Lydia, for your time this morning, adding yet another meeting to your calendar.
I'm slowing way down. My board insisted.
Before your vacation. And I just want to thank you personally. I'm so grateful for your support and your advertisement promotion of Urban Plan. And I hope to see everybody next Wednesday. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie and Dusty for final comments.
So I just want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank Lydia. This has been a great conversation. And again, thank you all for being here, supporting our Wake Up with WLI. And thank you, Brandy, for having so many great questions for Lydia. So I'm going to turn it back to Jamie.
All right, thank you, everybody. If you would like to stay and chat, I can, we can stay and hang out for a little bit. If you have any questions or want to learn more about WLI or Urban Plan, I'll be glad to be here. But I just wanted to thank our sponsors again, and also let you know of some upcoming programming we have. So like as Brandy and Lydia mentioned, we have a Urban Plan lightning round on Wednesday at 3 o'clock. It should go to about 5:30. These are really fun. I mean, we had a great time the first time we did it. We have an amazing instructor, and we hope you could join us to find out more. And we do have a program on April 29th. Featuring one of the honorable mentions from the ULI Heinz competition. They're called the Casey Knott team. So we're going to see their presentation and talk to the students that did this awesome project. So if you would like to stay, I will be here. If you want to continue on with your Friday, well, I welcome you to do that. So thank you all so much. And Lydia, you're wonderful. You are like my sunshine in the morning. And Brandy, thank you so much. Also another rock star that we have. And Dusty, always. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. And if you'd like to stay, I'm here.